After the backfired release of Quest for Camelot, Warner Bros. Was now having a low interest in the animation game when it comes to making animated films, and at that point, they wanted to shut down its animation division. But at the same time, there was one animated film to finish and yet to be released a year later, even after later releasing the animated film distributed by the studio The King and I. And so, with that said, let's talk about, interestingly, Brad Bird. Before his days at Pixar, Brad Bird was an uncredited Disney animator, but like the former member Don Bluth, he witnessed the management not being well handled, and he confronted the production manager leaders about the issue. This made one of the managers to kick him out of the studio. After that, this was giving Brad a hard choice to potentially leave animation. But before doing that, he decided to make a pencil test film of an animated comic book adaptation he wanted to make, The Spirit, with collaboration from animator Jerry Reese and Star Wars producer Gary Kurtz. But despite liking the script, unfortunately it was rejected by many studios because they were unwilling to take a gamble on an animated feature for the adult audience. Sometime later, after being a creative director for the TV series like The Simpsons first season and Family Dog, he got a job at Turner Feature Animation Studios. With that said, he pitched a potential project called Ray Gun, a futuristic sci-fi animated film with a script co-written by Matthew Robbins, who was a director of another sci-fi film, Barry's Not Included, which that one was Brad's film writing debut. But when Turner got bought by Warner Bros. And got merged into its animation facility, the project had to be let go. But despite the situation, the Warner Bros. Members gave Brad another option by choosing another project. After agreeing and checking that, he got interested in an animated project in the early stage of development presentation. And so he went on production for his directorial debut, plus next WB animated film after Camelot, The Iron Giant, based on the book The Iron Man by Ted Hughes. The story sets in the Cold War times of the late 50s at the town of Rockwell, where a smart but lonely boy named Hogarth Hughes lives with his mother Annie, who is an absent working waitress. But suddenly, he discovers and befriends a gigantic metallic robot who fell from outer space and eats metal. With the help of a hip young artist named Dean McCubbin, Hogarth attempts to prevent the US military and Kent Masley, a paranoid and ruthless federal agent, from finding and destroying the giant. The idea of making the film started way back in the 80s, even before there were movie-making intentions. At the time, rock musician Pete Townshend chose to adapt the book The Iron Man, not to be confused with the Marvel comic book character, for a concept album, and it was released as The Iron Man, a musical, in 1989. In 1991, Richard Basley, who later became the film's lead animator, pitched a version of The Iron Man to Don Bluth while working at his studio in Ireland along the story outline and character designs, but Bluth dismissed the project. After a stage musical was mounted in London, Dave McAnuff, who had adapted Tommy with Townshend, believed that the Iron Man could translate to the screen, and the project was ultimately acquired by Warner Bros. Entertainment. So in late 1996, it was the moment when Brad accepted the project as a director with Dave McAnuff and Alison Abbate as producers. After reading the original book by Hughes, Bird was so impressed with the mythology of the story and also was given an unusual amount of creative control by Warner Bros. And letting himself pitching his approach to the plot. This control involved introducing a couple of new characters not present in the original book, Dean and Kent, setting the film in America and discarding Townshend's musical ambitions, since Brad himself didn't vision the project as a musical genre. While the topic of friendship between Hogarth and Giant remains intact in the final film as the core element of the story, one major difference that has the source material is the England setting, plus one climactic battle between the Giant and a dragon from outer space that is a threat to Earth. Now that would have been an interesting mix of fantasy and sci-fi. Then again, the crew agreed that the friendship element would be more suitable for this movie adaptation. Thus, Brad would expand upon his desire to set the film in America in the 1950s in a later interview. The main setting looks Norman Rockwell idyllic on the outside, but inside everything is just about to boil over. Everyone was scared of the bomb, the Russians, Sputnik, even rock and roll. This clenched word cleaver smile masking fear, which is really what the Kent character was all about. It was the perfect environment to drop a 50-foot tall robot into. While Bird managed to take creative liberties on writing the story adaptation, writer Tim McInnes was hired to write the script, though Bird at first doubted his skills until he ended up convinced after reading one of his unfinished scripts that later became into the drama film Second-Hand Lions. Originally, in Brad's early treatment, America and the USSR were at war at the end, with the giant dying after that. But McInnes decided to have a brief scene displaying a survival element, since for him it was like killing E.T. and not bringing him back for another great moment. With only 3 months given to finish the script with a tight WB schedule, they crafted the needed elements for the story script, and Tim even sent a copy to the original author Hughes, who would be later surprised by answering back in his written words. "I want to tell you how much I liked what Brad Bird has done. He's made something all of a piece, with terrific sinister gathering momentum, and the ending came to me as a glorious piece of amazement. He's made a terrific dramatic situation out of the way he's developed the Iron Giant. I can't stop thinking about it."
Unfortunately, he passed away a year before its completion, and in the end, the film is dedicated to him.
Another story artist that came on board was Ted Newton, who made a test reel that surprised Bird, that he even let him make a catchy musical piece of animation in black and white as a reference to the 50s nuclear duck and cover cartoons shown at schools, which it became one of the crew's favorite animated pieces. On a side note, in an early version of the film's important tragic moment when the deer encounters with the protagonists, drafted by artist Dean Whelans, originally the sequence involved the giant's high curiosity to cause a tragedy by trying to catch the deer only to accidentally crush it to death instantly, giving a sense of shock and guilt. But the crew thought that the scene felt too much and very devastating that they disagreed on making the giant's accidental action and replace him with hunters as the cause of the tragedy instead. Interestingly enough, one of the important elements that Brad wanted to put on the story was a portrayal of the giant with a theme of what if a weapon has a soul and doesn't want to be a gun? That idea was inspired by a truly tragic family event from one of Brad's sisters killed by her husband with a gunshot, and that is why he got the concept for one of the film's emotional moments.
By the way, in the scene when Kent interrogates Hogarth, in a previous version, he gagged Hogarth when trying to run away and scream for help to his mom, only to get drugged at the same time, making him unconscious, and then tied up for the interrogation with some alternate lines from Kent. But the crew also thought that it was a bit disturbing and even more freaky for the audience than the final version we know.
For the voice cast, they brought young actor Eli Marienthal as Hogarth Hughes. Funny enough, the character's last name is an added reference to the original author. Other recognizable names that were involved included Harry Connick Jr., Christopher McDonald, John Mahoney, and Jennifer Aniston, who, after not getting the part for Quest for Camelot, she got a chance of getting her first animated role as Annie Hughes. In other words, comedy actress Cloris Leachman was also involved as Hogarth's school teacher for a couple of scenes, but due to time budget issues, one of them was cut from the picture and just a few lines from her character made it to the final film. For the voice of the Iron Giant, the crew originally thought of making his voice electronically, but then it was decided that a deep, resonant, and expressive voice would suitably work for the combination, and so actor Vin Diesel was hired for the role. And after his recordings, his performance would have other robotic sounds provided by the Skywalker Sound Company.
Good!
On a side note, Brad wanted to include some other special appearances as cameos in the feature, and that is why he included his old Disney animation masters Ollie Johnston and Frank Thomas voicing themselves as train engineers at the train crash aftermath scene. For the overall look of the film, the artist had to make 1950s settings along with the fashion in most of the clothing and their designs, with a stylized look with a combination of Disney and Don Bluth, plus the fact that their style is inspired by the illustrations of the 50s, and the artists like Chuck Jones, Hank Ketchman, Al Hirschfeld, and even the 50s-60s cartoons from Disney like 101 Dalmatians were influences for the animation design. Plus, most of them had to make a trip to Maine State, where they photographed and videotaped 5 small cities with different place visits as research like storefronts, barns, forests, homes, home interiors, diners, and many things needed, including the bark on trees. As for animatics, scene plannings by Bird, to make sure no budgetary concerns and this time getting some creative control at the studio, the team initially worked with Macromedia's director software before switching to Adobe After Effects full-time. This gave a new advantage for the storyboard artists to contain indications of the camera moves in a very revolutionary way of visualizing the story. When it comes to the Giant's design, there have been many attempts since the musical version was presented, and then after going to the new direction with later transitions, Oscar-winning effects artist and filmmaker Joe Johnston, who was one of the designers of the original Star Wars trilogy, made several sketches of the Giant that one has a childlike characterization, and eventually satisfied the director as the official overall design of the character with some refinements on his expressions by production designer Mark Whiting and lead animator Steve Markowski. As for the animation, in this case crafted by the entire WB animation facility, while the people of Rockwell were made in hand-drawn along most of the effects, the character Giant, along with some props and vehicles, was made through computer animation with a variety of software including the early versions of Maya, RenderMan, and even Photoshop for the digital graphic compositions. Using the software and experimenting with the 3D animation of the Giant's expressions and how he can move in different actions, the team would then animate the Giant on twos, aka 12 frames per second, when interacting with the hand-drawn characters to make it simple and less obvious that it was a computer model and fit in the 2D crafted universe along with its lack of much detail. In other words, one particular part Brad animated himself yet uncredited is the scene when Hogarth gets his fast-talking effect from drinking espresso coffee, which that scene is based on the hard experience with studio managers when working at Disney, as a complaining reference.
So she moved me up a grade because I wasn't fitting in, so now I'm even more not fitting in. I was getting good grades, like always. So my mom says, you need stimulation. And I go, no, I'm stimulated enough right now.
That's for sure.
So she goes, you don't have a challenge. You need a challenge. So now I'm challenged, all right? I'm challenged to hold on to my lunch money because of all the big mooses who want to pound me because I'm a shrimpy dork who thinks he's smarter than them. But I don't think I'm smarter. I just do the stupid homework. If everyone else just did the stupid homework, they could move up a grade and get pounded too. Is there any more coffee?
For the music, the score was composed and conducted by Oscar nominee Michael Kamen, known for such film scores like Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, making this his only animated collaboration with Brad Bird, who originally wanted his music to be like a combination of Bernard Herrmann cues from the sci-fi films of the 50s and 60s. That option, however, scared Kamen, who believed that the sound of the orchestra is more important to the feeling of the film. So he decided to combine Eastern Europe for an old-fashioned sounding orchestra inspired by the conducting music of Strauss and Old Pine Symphony at the famous Czech Philharmonic Orchestra in Prague, where he went to hear the musical event and eventually got a place to conduct the orchestra for the film score, with Bert describing it as an amazing collection of musicians. On a side note, the music was recorded in a rather unconventional way compared to other films. Recorded over 1 week at the Rudolfinum in Prague, the music was recorded without conventional uses of music synchronization and played as if it were a piece of classical repertoire. Coming to post-production, the director wanted to produce the film in widescreen, specifically the wide CinemaScope aspect ratio. Plus he thought of including the CinemaScope logo on a poster as a fun reference, but the logo's trademark owner, 20th Century Fox, refused to let the reference happen. The film was originally going to be released under the Warner Bros. Family Entertainment banner, but Brad wanted to put something different that he even convinced the executives. So instead of using the Bugs Bunny banner, the crew made another version of the logo to resemble the classic studio logo in a circle employed in Looney Tunes shorts, but apparently with a serious background sound of a submarine. Before officially finishing the film, Brad and producer Allison still found some inconsistent issues with the studio leaders, particularly not deciding themselves on the promotion of the film due to the experience they had with Quest for Camelot. When they convinced them to present the unfinished version of the film to a test audience, especially when one studio member secretly leaked a rough cut of the film to a popular movie fan website called Ain't It Cool News to gain some attention and anticipation,
It gained extremely positive notes that even some scenes made the entire crew cry during production, with a sense that maybe Warner Brothers was capable of making different yet great movies in the animation field with serious film ratings. Plus the fact that the executives, after watching the unfinished movie, they were highly motivated for the film's potential hit, that they immediately and supposedly went to manage on the film's marketing and giving an official release for August of 1999. With a few months ahead, everything was set and shown to Brad for the marketing and promotion strategy, with some later TV spots. Although the latter was mostly disliked by Brad himself, yet he felt confident on the campaign's fair actions, and the film was finally completed with a great celebration to the whole crew's creative effort for making something different and marvelous at the end of the day, with even imagining a Best Picture nomination at the Oscars, plus the fact that this film was given a PG rating by the American MPA Association. On July 23rd, the film made its Hollywood red carpet premiere at the Chinese Theater, with a special ceremony preceding the screening in which a concrete slab bearing the title character's footprint was commemorated. When it finally got released on August 4th at LA and New York, then nationwide on August 6, 1999, like what happened to the test audience, it received universal acclaim. Critics and audiences praised the film for its storytelling, animation, humor, voice acting, and the portrayal of the title character, calling the movie an endearing masterpiece that tackles ambitious topics and complex human relationships with a steady hand and beautifully animated direction from Brad Bird, even calling the film an American masterpiece since E.T. and one of the best animated films of the decade. As for the box office numbers, when it greatly opened for over 2,000 national theaters and with a budget of $50 million to produce plus an additional $30 million going towards marketing, that went into a tragic nuclear twist. On its opening weekend, the film ranked at number 9 by getting $5.7 million at the box office, and in the end grossed around $23 million domestically, with a worldwide total of $31 million. Ultimately making this great event into a great flop. One of the reasons for that situation was not necessarily due to big movie competitions, but due to lack of marketing. Looks like those strategies approved by Brad himself plus the budget used were mostly used for nothing.
Heck, it would have been awesome to see a giant model of him holding a burger. Imagine that. But in the end, what a pity.
Our troubles are over.
Even Brad was witnessing the foreshadowing problem when at his first days of seeing the film's positive reviews in the morning at LA, and when he went to the LA movie theater, there was almost nothing of the marketing that it was supposed to be, like having a poster at Johnny Rocket's diner, and inside the theater, not even a big official logo for the theater auditoriums near the box office, nothing but a basic piece of written paper hanged on the last line, and one-legged giant model located at the exit side instead of the entrance, with just around 10 to 12 people watching and praising the movie. With this humiliating experience, Brad and his crew knew that they were screwed with the results.
So when everything has been lost cause from the poor reception in theaters, an unexpected phone call came from the popular director Guillermo del Toro, telling about his positive reaction to the film and cheering up the whole crew with motivational quotes like this. In the light of the box office, the audience, the numbers, you feel like a loser, but this will pass. You have made a classic. It will stay in the hearts and minds of anyone that sees it. It will honestly live forever.
Despite the failure, the film would have a happy ending. Although it didn't earn an Oscar nomination, it won 9 Annie Awards, including Best Animated Effects, Character Animation, Directing, Music, Production Design, Storyboarding, Voice Acting with Eli Marienthal's performance as Hogarth, Writing, and Best Animated Film. The film was also nominated for an Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation and won a Children's BAFTA Award for Best Feature Film. As time went by, the film itself became a cult classic thanks to the case of home media marketing and later TV syndication for Cartoon Network and TNT. The film's reputation would drastically grow from an underrated gem to an animated masterpiece. Throughout the years, the film got recognized by several prestigious lists. IGN ranked The Iron Giant as the 5th favorite animated film of all time in a list published in 2010.
The American Film Institute nominated The Iron Giant for its top 10 animated films list, and WatchMojo.com ranked The Iron Giant number 6 on its top 10 animated films of the 1990s, and alphabetically added the film to the greatest animated movies of all time A to C list. The film itself even became a great influence for many artists. Ori in The Blind Forest was inspired by this, along with The Lion King. The character Giant would later become a recognizable robot icon, and there would be a thematic reference of his portrayal, like in Duck Dodger's TV episode The Fall Friend, and even made a special appearance as one of the player's climatic egos in Steven Spielberg's Ready Player One, released in 2018. In 2015, the film was re-released in selected theaters for a limited time and later in Blu-ray as the signature edition, with a couple of new scenes animated by Duncan Studios that were supposed to be in the original release but cut due to time issues. One that is the interaction of Dean and Annie, and the other is the Giant's intense dream sequence explaining his apparent origins.
The funny thing is that in the original version, Brad wanted to put a Disney reference of Tomorrowland in a TV scene, but Disney did not allow him to put it, so instead he had to put a oatmeal commercial animated by John Hubley from the 1950s. That is until years later for the signature re-release, when Disney finally allowed him to use the footage reference.
Tomorrowland. Promise of things to come.
Coincidentally, the film was re-released on the same year as Brad Bird's Tomorrowland.
In other words, ever since its release, when questioned over social media if there was ever a possibility of a sequel, Bird stated that because of the film's flop, a sequel wasn't possible. But at the same time, he clarified that the film does not need a sequel and works as its own thing without any extension necessary. The movie may not have been a great start on its original release, but its heart is in the right place beyond the love and soul of the audience, and regarded as one of the greatest non-Disney animated films of all time. A few years later, Warner Bros. Decided to make another hybrid movie with a unique direction inside a human's body, and that is Osmosis Jones. Set in the live-action environment of Rhode Island, a health-lacking zookeeper by the name of Frank Dettori eats a filthy egg, and once inside the animated world of his body, a dangerous virus named Frax rises from the food's remains and causes damages to Frank's body. Now it is up to a cocky white cell cop named Osmosis Jones, along his newly arrived cold pill partner called Drakes, to stop him before killing Frank within 48 hours. The idea of the film started when writer Mark Hyman thought of an interesting idea for a long time ago, that he wanted to do a story about microscopic organisms which interplace between the tiny creatures and the real world, with an ironic sense of internal chaos that adds an extra layer of satire to the story, and adding elements involving white cells as policemen and the viruses as criminals, inspired as an homage to action-packed films like 48 Hours and Lethal Weapon. But apparently, this is a project that even went through development hell sometime during production. Anyways, by pitching this to the studio, the executives and animator Tom Zito loved the idea, and by getting settled, Zito got involved as an animation director of the film, along with animator Pete Kroon. But since they couldn't precisely direct the live-action parts, it took some time to find both a director and even a star actor for the outside sequences. That is until Saturday Night Live star Bill Murray was cast as the main character of Frank, along other Night Live members Chris Elliott, Molly Shannon, and introducing Elena Franklin as Frank's daughter, Shane, and comedy directors Peter and Bobby Farrelly stepped in as the live-action directors, but at the same time as primary directors according to contract. For the voice casting, originally Will Smith was supposed to be the voice of Jones, but due to scheduling issues, he was replaced by Chris Rock. Other members of the voice cast included David Hyde Pierce as Drakes, Brenda Norwood as Jones' love interest Leah, William Shatner as the pompous self-centered Mayor Fleming, and Matrix star Lawrence Fishburne as Frax. Speaking of which, there is an animated reference of that franchise, so we can say that there is a Matrix connection, but on the opposite side from hero to villain.
For the look inside the body, with over 600 people involved with more digital tools combined, the animators had to make the city of Frank and his entire body by giving a feel of a huge scale, kind of like a great city and poor streets of New York with a microorganic aspect along with some dangerous territories like biological mountains and even like unknown planet territory from a cell's perspective, especially when they are outside the bodies when it is a 3D animated perspective. The goal for the design of the anthropomorphic characters was making them in a cartoony humanoid style with some smooth elements like additional light color layers around their skins, particularly for the white cell characters, with clothing representing them as citizens. While villainous Frags had a much solid, dark, and sophisticated look with a sense of a threatening crime boss. In other words, there has been a variety of creative liberties for the animated designs of random characters outside the main ones that are the fogs and any kind of little germs that are interpreted as simple pests. For Drake's design, the artist gave him a robotic aspect with a gun arm and floating propulsor, and like the Iron Giant, he was animated through computer and with a simple color mix that makes him belong in the same universe. But one major difference was mainly his face, since his mouth was animated through different lip sync, plus his personality is based on Pierce's expressions. Despite he was entirely animated in CGI, there was one instance that it had to use a 2D animated head.
What do you think?
Other artistic elements that the crew made were the digital effects and graphics, showing in different forms for a microscopic world, including fire, liquids, and all movements of the organs that are mostly presented as big functioning city halls. Plus, this will be the third and final collaboration of 2D FX artist Michel Gagné for Warner Bros. Feature animation after The Iron Giant. Originally, the film was going to be a PG-13 movie, but almost all of the swearings, a scene of Ozzy and Drake spitting sperm cells at a gym section, and several violent scenes were cut or dubbed over to be more kid-friendly, with a PG rating for bodily humor. And despite that issue, they still put a reproductive cell monument as a referential founder joke on the mayor's place. The film got its premiere on August 7, 2001 at the Grauman's Egyptian Theatre in Hollywood, and when it was finally released on August 10, the reviews were mostly mixed, with some praising the animated segments mixed with the live-action elements, the performances, especially the voice acting, and the film's plot. But they criticized the unnecessary overuse of gross-out humor and mostly the live-action segments. As for the box office results, well, I think one germ will make a relatable reaction to this conflict. It was a gross-out stamp. The movie opened at number 7 in its first opening weekend, accumulating around $5 million, giving later a gross of $13 million domestically and getting a total of $14 million worldwide against a budget of $70 million, making this a big box office bump. One of the biggest reasons for the conflict was, once again, due to the lack of marketing and inconsistent planning from the studio executives. By the way, there was very little merchandising for the film. Originally, Trendmasters planned on releasing a toy line of the characters from the film if the film exceeded $65 million at the box office, but unfortunately due to the film's poor financial results, the toys were never released. But I have to admit that those could have been quite cool and fascinating, that someone was lucky to keep those prototype action figures. Despite the overall reception, the film received a Just for Laughs award at the Montreal Comedy Film Festival, and it was nominated for 6 Annie Awards, including Best Character Design, Best Production Design, Character Animation, FX Animation, Writing, William Shatner's Voice Acting, and Best Animated Film, ultimately losing them all to Shrek and The Emperor's New Groove. Interestingly enough, the film was listed to be potentially nominated for the first Best Animated Film Academy Award, but in the end it didn't earn any nomination. As for its soundtrack reception, although it failed to make it to any Billboard charts, a couple of tracks managed to gather their own hits. Trick Daddy's single Take It to the House managed to make it to number 88 at the Billboard's Hot 100, and technically R. Kelly's track I Believe managed to get inaugurations to get some popularity, but with a later rewritten non-album song that served as a presidential inauguration for Barack Obama in 2008, and it ranked at peak number 2 at German charts and 92 on Billboard, bubbling under hip-hop singles. Even if the film didn't get financial success, it did receive some success thanks to its home release, and with that small second chance, Warner Bros. Animation made a TV spin-off series based on the movie where the duo accidentally go from Frank City to Ector City, and now they have to protect their new home inside Teen Ector with 26 episodes on WB Kids. And unlike the feature that has live-action segments, the series is entirely animated inside and outside the body, and thanks to the spin-off's positive reception, a video game based on the series was made for the Game Boy Advance. Thanks to the home media and TV syndication, the film eventually managed to become a fun cult following and even gather some fanbase, proving that inside our organism wishes to have a microorganic friend that is capable of protecting our health. Speaking of which, at the time of this video, this will be a fascinating time to need him the most against the coronavirus. Once again, 2 years later, another animated project would happen, but this time with the Looney Tunes in the same hybrid style of Space Jam, and having action-packed spy elements plus a dedication to the classic cartoons. So with one more try of finding success, Warner Bros. Animation released Looney Tunes, Back in Action.
But like Space Jam, this was already explained by Animat himself. So once again, I will talk about extra things he didn't mention before. So with that said, hit it again, Matt! Ugh, yikes. That's gonna haunt my nightmares. Ugh. Shall we move on, please?
It's about a stuntman called DJ, who was partially working as a security guard at Warner Bros. Studios and asked to throw out Daffy Duck away due to his constant demanding of getting the same results with Bugs Bunny and fed up with his usual blasted roles, but end up both losing their jobs after causing a water tower accident when chasing and capturing Daffy. Suddenly, they both discover that spy actor Damian Drake, DJ's dad, is an actual secret agent spy and was kidnapped by the head of Acme Corporation, Mr. Sherman, who plans to dominate and transform the entire world into monkeys by stealing and using the Blue Monkey Diamond. Now it is up to DJ and Daffy, along with WB Vice President Kate Houghton and Bugs Bunny, who both needed Daffy Duck back to the studio, to rescue Damian Drake, find the Blue Monkey, and save the world from the evil chairman's plans. At first, this was all supposed to be a sequel to Space Jam, with the same production crew including director Joel Pitka and animation directors Bruce Smith, Tony Cerrone, and even animator Spike Brent. The film was going to be about a new basketball challenge in which Michael Jordan and the Looney Tunes are against a new alien villain called Berserko, with visual designs explored for the main villains. But unfortunately, Warner Brothers failed to bring the crucial star MJ to reprise his self-role after declining his return to appear. So, the producers had to keep their animators busy in secret without knowing anything until the project eventually was cancelled. After that factor, they decided to take another option. Instead of a sequel, a spin-off movie would work, featuring Jackie Chan in an action-packed hybrid film called Spy Jam. Other sports ideas were discussed, including Race Jam featuring Jeff Gordon, Skate Jam featuring Tony Hawk, and even a golf-centered film featuring Tiger Woods. Probably called Golf Jam, if you ask me. But those ideas ended up being scrapped, especially when Chan had to quit the project due to production arguments. Yet the action-packed spy elements were still in mind as a basis for another project intention. Not to mention that Gordon had luck on having a cameo part. So after failing in those jamming spin-off ideas, Warner Bros. Eventually got the director of Gremlins films, Joe Dante, who has always been a huge Looney Tunes fan, that he even put an animated segment with collaboration of Chuck Jones at the start and post-credit scenes in Gremlins 2. And at one point, when he went to the studio in the 1990s, he pitched a biographical HBO series based on the career of Chuck Jones called Termite Terrace. And funny enough, despite that it had potential and it received a good reception at the studio, the executives considerably commented,
"Look, Joe, it's an old story. It got period stuff in it. We don't want that. We want to rebrand our characters and we want to do it Space Jam."
The funny fact is that despite being a big Looney fan, ironically he was not a fan of the movie Space Jam, because he disliked the most changed personalities of the characters and feeling that it was a disappointment and insult to the Looney Tunes legacy with Chuck Jones. If you ask me regarding the issue, what is technically the difference? The cartoon characters from that film still pretty much have the same wacky personalities, unless having a special eye for consideration. Anyways, back in the production, as I said before, when Spy Jam was technically cancelled, the spy action element involving Looney Tunes still had the potential to be made as a spiritual successor to Space Jam. With that comedic, action-packed Looney Tunes concept, it got the interest of Dante to be involved and agreed to direct the now titled Back in Action, even as a tribute to the Looney Tunes cartoons and Chuck Jones, who unfortunately passed away when beginning production. While drafting the script, however, besides of being a true homage like most likely the previous film, he and his screenwriter Larry Dole really wanted the film to be the anti-Space Jam, making something that Space Jam was not, plus ignoring it no matter what. In other words, obviously, for the story, since this is a Looney Tunes feature film, but this time with adventurous elements, it was like a gag-fest event with no compelling narrative necessary, since the point was crafting the storyline from gag to gag and location to location. Thus these elements combined make it into a literal film reminiscent to the cartoons, since it is part of the essential charm. Not to mention that the goal for the comedy is to be a self-aware parody to several action-packed movies like Indiana Jones, Mission Impossible, and even James Bond. And since this is also an action-packed comedy film, Dante's previous version of the envisioned script for the beginning, middle, and climactic ending was very different from the final product we know. So when presenting the script to the executives, despite the appreciation of the cartoons, the fun action elements, and even being made by fans, Warner Bros. Did not like entirely the script, that they were pushing Dante to revise it and make it feel like a Space Jam movie. Even though the project greenlit to begin filming, the studio gave the director not much creative freedom. In a way, the production was very chaotic for both Dante and Disney animator Eric Goldberg, who was in charge of the animation direction. Although they managed in keeping the original cartoon personalities of the characters, they were fighting against the studio towards other aspects of the film, including some alternate scenes that had to be cut, especially the ones that I previously mentioned. With that said, the movie was originally going to have a completely different opening, middle, and ending plot progression. The beginning was a parody of Batman with Daffy Duck as Bat Duck battling Elmer Fudd portraying as the Joker. Next was the middle, when involves Daffy Duck being chased individually by Marvin Martian, additionally during the escape from Area 52. And then the climactic ending itself would have stayed in the jungle and involved Tweety to a greater extent in the final battle, even with some more romantic moments between the main characters. But partly due to the constant demands of the studio, the scenes had to be mostly cut, replacing the Batman spoof into a Rabbit Duck season cartoon reference, while switching and modifying the rest, since the Duck Dodgers chasing battle element worked better for the climax. What's even crazier is that the executives got tired of the film's jokes and wanted them to be changed, and despite one credited writer, the studio brought in 25 gag writers to try and write jokes that were short enough to fit into an animated character's mouth. All the production was going either loonier than expected, that even Dante mentioned, "I was making a movie for them with those characters, and they did not want to know about those characters. They didn't want to know why Bugs Bunny shouldn't do hip-hop." It was a pretty grim experience all around. Speaking of characters, when casting Brendan Fraser and Jenna Elfman as the leading roles of DJ and Kate, For the villain's case, while considering comedians like either Robin Williams or Tim Allen to be the Acme Sherman, the role was given to Steve Martin instead, but with his condition of putting Doctor Who Dalek robots in the Alien 52 scenes, for some nonsensical yet fun reference reason, I suppose. By the way, this film is noted by putting several cameos besides animated ones and the mentioned robots, including Cowles McCarty as his reprised role Dr. Biles Bonnell from Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and John Cleese during a Paris scene, which the latter had to be cut due to pacing issues. Although this was the film that was clashing between the Studio Space Jam follow-up and Dante's disregard on the first film, there were a couple of Space Jam cameos that managed to be in the film, like digitally edited footage of Michael Jordan as a nonsensical reference plus studio demands.
Let's do some drills.
This doesn't make a lick of sense.
And technically Lola Bunny appearing in some posters. Speaking of Lola, while disregarding her character, which was created as a politically correct counterpart for Bugs Bunny, is used as a spoof when Kate suggests him of needing a hot female counterpart for the movie roles.
Answer, we team you up with a hot female co-star.
Usually, I play the female love interest.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my honey.
About the cross-dressing thing in the past, funny. Today, disturbing.
The funny additional fact is that since this film is a James Bond parody, Timothy Dalton was cast as secret spy actor Damian Drake as a self-reference to his iconic James Bond roles. Funny enough, regarding animated cameos besides other Looney Tunes, Dante wanted to give more Roger Rabbit feeling into the film by putting non-Looney Tunes characters like Tom and Jerry and Droopy. But Warner Brothers rejected that idea and just agreed on putting Shaggy and Scooby interacting, yet ironically criticizing Matthew Lillard for his praised live-action role in the 2002 Scooby-Doo movie, even referencing the yet-to-be-released 2004 sequel.
What kind of performance do you call that? You made me sound like a total space cadet, man!
I'm sorry you feel that way. I was trying to be real to your character.
If you like goof on me in the sequel, I'm coming after you!
Yeah, and I'll give you a Scooby smack.
When it comes to the voice actors, a few of them did reprise their characters from Space Jam, including June Foray, Bob Bergen, and Billy West, who the latter was also going to reprise Bugs Bunny, but during production he was replaced by Joe Alaskey, and this became one of the hated experiences for Bill due to the situation caused by Dante for being very demanding and even indecisive. Speaking of other multiple roles, actor Brendan Fraser, besides performing as DJ and the actor himself in the last scenes, also provided the voices for both Taz and She-Devil, while animator Eric Goldberg also provided some character voices including Speedy Gonzales, Tweety Bird, and Marvin the Martian, especially one line for Bugs after a Psycho reference.
Doesn't anyone knock anymore?
Unlike Space Jam, this has a more live-action environment than an entirely digital environment, at least for the most part, to combine the hand-drawn characters. For the filming aspects, located in the mainstream WB studio, Las Vegas, Paris, and the African jungle that is also part of the set, along with visually implementing the world building of the Looney Tunes in the real world, like the Yosemite Sam Casino and the Acme Corporation. Like other hybrid films, there had to be in this case all different kind of technical aspects for the special effects, besides of having some makeup effects for most of the alien scenes, including referential hand puppet characters who interact with the actors even for rehearsals, along putting green screen stunts and wires to make real interactions with objects to be digitally removed with the use of some blue screen in the background after rehearsing. And this process is pretty much the same combined with Roger Rabbit with more live-action interaction, and Space Jam by digitally blending the details with practical and digital effects with hand-drawn and CGI animation, which the latter was even used for the wacky vehicles and machinery that includes a robotic cartoon dog in the climax. Curious enough, to create the WB tower fall effect, it had to be digitally and practically filmed with a small-scaled model in a filmed blue screen perspective, in one lucky shot after making literally the CGI effect shot. Now talking about the 2D animation process directed by Goldberg, with the character design slightly updated and more based on Chuck Jones style, yet still in modern standard like Space Jam, plus using the Wacom tablet to make the animatic character sequences in how they act in the live-action environment before being fluently animated at the main facilities, plus the collaboration of some Canadian studios. The character animation was pretty much crafted in the same way as the previous hybrid film, by drawing frame by frame and then scanning for later cleanup and composition with all the coloring and shading elements, with exception of animating and coloring Shaggy and Scooby in basic stiff animation style as a reference to the classic Hanna-Barbera TV animation standard. Not to mention that there has been a variety of creative styles when Bugs, Daffy and Elmer parody many works of art for the Paris chase sequence, with different composition aspects. This would also be the last film for some involving people before their demise, including Peter Graves, Mark Lawrence, and Oscar-winning composer Jerry Goldsmith, and so John Debney had to complete the job for him as an additional composer. With a half of a year of crazy production being completed, originally the movie was set to be released on July 2003, but when Finding Nemo was having success at that time, the film was moved to November 14 in order to avoid competition. Coincidentally, yet ironically, the movie makes a funny reference to that film.
Hey, what do you know? I found Nemo.
And so when the Looney Tunes went back on the action in a brand new way to the big screen, similar to Space Jam, the critical results were mixed yet mostly okay in a certain way, agreeing that the ridiculous plot and most of the comedic elements are mediocre, but overall had a lot of fun with the Looney Tunes comedy, along with the animation hybrid aspect and the casting, even considered as a slight improvement from the previous film for being very faithful to the cartoons. As for the financial results, like probably the production compared, it was chaotically a bomb. With a budget of $80 million, the movie only made $20.9 million domestically and $68.5 million worldwide, making it a great disappointment. And one of the reasons was due to the competitions with other films. Analyzing the topic, it was released at the same time as Masters Inc. Commander, a week after Brother Bear and Elf, and later The Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, and especially The Cat in the Hat. While at least the latter film is now considered a cult guilty pleasure, that it is now even more visually appreciated than the Cats adaptation. Not to mention that there was little promotion to the film, including Wendy's and even a video game based on the movie, that it is also based on the original vision of the director, and a DC comic book adaptation like they did previously with Space Jam, due to Warner Brothers refusing to heavily market it by the chaotic production and expensively over budget issues. While Warner Brothers feature animation technically shut down after the flop of Osmosis Jones before this film came out, this was the last tryout to revive it once again, but when the film failed at the box office, the feature animations facility officially shut down and temporarily discouraged Warner Brothers from making any more animated theatrical projects, including the Looney Tunes, specifically the other theatrical shorts that were in production, and only a few of them that would originally tie in with the film, along with the animated series of Duck Dodgers, were released in separate aspect ratio and widescreen home media releases. So since then, Joe Dante has mostly been refusing to talk about the events of his production experience, and the only consideration he would generally say about this film is still better than Space Jam. By the way, they were originally going to potentially make the Skate Jam project that was in talks with Tony Hawk, but unfortunately due to the failure of Back in Action, the project got officially cancelled. But even if there was little to not much fun production, the film itself managed to maintain the legacy of the original cartoons, and pretty much the same way as Space Jam, as a great piece of entertainment, though not exactly as iconic. On a side note, the film received some nominations at the Annie Awards, including Best Animated Film, Directing, Character Animation, and Voice Acting for Joe Alaskey's performance as Daffy, losing all of them to Disney Pixar's Finding Nemo. Like mentioned, no more new cartoons featuring the Looney Tunes would happen after the film.
That is until sometime later when Warner Bros. Animation decided to make new animated short films made in 3D with collaboration from Real FX animation studios. In 2019, Warner Bros. Animation announced that new short cartoons inspired by the classics would be made, starting with the Daffy Duck and Porky Pig cartoon Curse of the Monkey Bird at the 2018 Annecy Film Festival, and another one, Dynamite Dance, in 2019, with Bugs and Elmer as a sneak peek cartoon presenting the latest cartoons and releasing them for the mainstream media on HBO Max in 2020, proving that the Looney legacy is not that all over, folks.
Go home, folks.
After the failure of Back in Action and shutting down the animation division for theatrical releases, the mainstream studio decided to stop entering into feature animation field and just making other animated projects for television, home media, and a few short film projects, especially a small animated segment in the live-action Scooby-Doo sequel in 2004. Besides of that, the studio still collaborated on just presenting and distributing animated films made by different companies like Corpse Bride, The Ant Bully, the Oscar winner Happy Feet along with its later sequel, and Legend of the Guardians.
The funny fact is that Happy Feet, released in 2006 and winner of the Best Animated Film Oscar, technically became the first successful animated film presented by Warner Bros. Pictures since Space Jam.
That is until 2013 when Jeff Robinov, who would later be head of the studio's motion picture division, founded a screenplay development department nicknamed a think tank for developing theatrical animated films, known as the Warner Animation Group, the successor of Warner Bros. Feature Animation. The group includes John Requa, Glenn Ficarra, Nicholas Stoller, Jared Stern, and the creative duo Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who both previously directed the Sony animated film Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. With all combined, Warner Bros. Created the group with the hope that the box office reception of its films will be competitive with other animation studios' releases, and this time, the group is quite similar to Pixar Animation Studios' Brain Trust when it comes to consulting one member with one another and give feedback on each other's projects. And so, with all things prepared and organized, the group started production with a touch of Lego toys and creativity to the first animated project as also essentially Warner Bros. Animation's next animated film, The Lego Movie. It's the story of an ordinary Lego figure named Emmett, a happy-go-lucky routine worker of Lego City who suddenly finds a mysterious block and he's mistakenly identified as the most extraordinary person and the key to save the world by a female rebel fighter named Wildstyle. Now drafted as a chosen one by her and the mystical master builder Vitruvius into a fellowship of strangers, Emmett and his new friends, including Lego Batman and a unicorn-horned kitty, are on an epic quest to use Emmett's found lock, known as the Piece of Resistance, to stop the tyrant Lord Business and his evil plans of gluing the entire Lego world. The idea of the film started when producer Dan Lin thought about making a Lego film project and began discussing with Roy Lee before leaving Warner Bros. To form his own production company in 2008. Meanwhile, Warner Bros. Home Entertainment executive Kevin Tsujihara had recognized the value of the LEGO franchise by engineering the studio's purchase of LEGO video games licensee Traveler's Tales in 2007, and he thought that the success of the LEGO-based video games, especially the home media of LEGO-based direct-to-video features, indicated that a cinematic LEGO-based film was a good idea and reportedly championed the development of the film. So by August 2009, Dan and Kevin Hageman were writing the script described as action-adventure set in a LEGO world, and by June 2010, Phil Lord and Chris Miller were in talks to be in the project as directors. Interestingly enough, when it was pitching for Warner Bros., artist Sean McNally made some visuals with a different kind of story with most of the main characters. Originally, the story was about a young Lego figure leaving his small Lego town behind to go on an adventure in the human world, and encounters different Lego environments and toy characters scattered in the real world, including post-apocalyptic scavengers hunting for batteries and pirates battling giant bat toy creatures, even probably a special appearance of Thomas the Train Agent. But eventually, the project would be pitched into a different direction by Lord and Miller. With that said, sometime later in November of the following year, the newly rebooted Warner Bros. Animation officially greenlit the project to be set and released in 2014. As for its title, there have been subsequent changes. First, its working title was Lego: The Piece of Resistance for a February 28 release date, and then later just titled Lego for a February 7 release. For the voices, the crew brought an all-star cast including Chris Pratt as Emmett, Elizabeth Banks as Lifestyle aka Lucy, Will Arnett as Batman, Morgan Freeman as the Wizard Vitruvius, and Will Ferrell as Lord Business, who the latter also portrays the man upstairs in the live-action sequence at the film's climax. Other actors including Nick Offerman, Alison Brie, Charlie Day, and Liam Neeson provided the voices for the supporting LEGO characters. Speaking of characters, while many of them were created exclusively for the film, there have been cameos and special appearances of many related characters from different franchises and media, including the rest of the Justice League, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Simpsons, TMNT, Abraham Lincoln, and so much more that can be found for this movie. The film is primarily done in CGI, but unlike technically the ones used for the direct-to-video films, the goal for the visuals is giving the film an innovative way of animating the characters and effects with sense of a huge and energetic creativity and fun. As you can see, the film is strongly inspired by the visual aesthetics and stylistics of brick films and qualities attributed to LEGO Studio sets. Now about explaining beyond what the artists wanted to do with this production about playing and animating for the playful execution results, animator Chris McKay generally said, "We wanted to make the film feel like the way you play, the way I remember playing. We wanted to make it feel as epic and ambitious and self-serious as a kid feels when they play with Lego. We took something you could claim is the most cynical cash grab in cinematic history, basically a 90-minute Lego commercial, and turned it into a celebration of creativity, fun, and invention, in the spirit of just having a good time and how ridiculous it can look when you make things up." With that said, many artists have been huge fans of the toy line when they were mostly little, including the directors themselves, which one of them used his spaceship to be included in the film. And with the help of the animation studio Animal Logic, the animators managed of modeling and making the characters and environments digitally based on the toy counterparts as references thanks to the LEGO Digital Designer program, and later applying the character animation rigs that follow the same articulation limits that actual LEGO figures have, and moving the characters giving the basic feel of stop motion through computer graphics with Maya and soft image software. Plus the fact that the 2D lip sync and facial animation were also made digitally through those programs. So by the end of the day, the entire movie overall is made over 99% animated by Legos, including the visual effects like water, smoke, and fire, mostly made by Lego bricks, while other exceptions would be the glue liquids, the multi-dimensional clouds, and particularly most of the background lightings. As for the use of cinematography, while most of the later climactic scenes representing the real-world universe were filmed in live-action, the camera systems for the animation also tried to replicate live-action cinematography, including different lenses and a Steadicam simulator, giving the cinematic look of the Lego film in a huge Lego scale. For the soundtrack, composer Mark Mothersbaugh, who previously worked on the Lord Miller movies, was hired to compose the film's score, and as well produced the movie's theme song Everything's Awesome, written by El Tigre and Robot Chicken composer Sean Patterson, with Joshua Bartholomew and Lisa Harrington, who also performed the song in the movie under the name Joe Lee, with rap lyrics by The Lonely Island for the end credits performed by themselves along with Tegan and Sarah. In the end, through post-production, the title once again changed for an official title from Lego to The Lego Movie. At one point regarding the budget, including production, prints, and advertising plus marketing, the cost was $100 million. Half of the film's price was funded by Village Roadshow Pictures, while the rest was sent by Warner Bros., with Red Pack June Entertainment giving a small share as part of the multi-year financing agreement with Warner Bros. At first, Warner Bros. Turned down Village Roadshow Pictures when asked in investing the film, but due to its lack of confidence on the film, even probably due to the previous disappointing experiences, the company decided to agree the offer, giving Village the chance to fund 25% of the film and later an additional 25%. By the end of the day, apparently the film's official budget got around $60 to $65 million. Now the film constructed to the finish, plus marketing that has the movie collectible figurine stores, video games, and other stuff like Happy Meal toys, the Lego picture premiered at the Westwood Regency Village Theatre on February 1st, 2014, and got prior release in Denmark on February 6th, while Australia got it later on April 3rd. When it was officially released nationwide on February 7th, for the first time combining the results of previous films like Iron Giant and Space Jam, it was a critical and commercial success. Critics and audiences everywhere loved the film for its innovative use of animation, humor, story, creativity, and voice performances, saying that boasting beautiful animation, a charming voice cast, laugh-a-minute gags, and a surprisingly thoughtful story, the Lego Movie is a colorful fun for all ages. Many critics called the film as one of the best animated films of 2014. In other words, even conservative political commentator Glenn Beck praised the film for skipping the double meanings and adult humor, but some other politics and senators like Ron Johnson criticized the film for its anti-corporate message and propaganda implication by mostly saying that it taught kids to like the government and hate business. But on the other hand, those criticisms were criticized by many people and even politic Russ Feingold that they made wrote the negative comments on the campaign trail during his 2016 Senate bid against Johnson. At the box office, it ranked number 1 on its opening weekend by gathering over $69 million and later making totally $257.8 million domestically with a total gross of $468.1 million worldwide, making it a box office success. The soundtrack with theme song Everything's Awesome also became successful by getting several Billboard and music charts, including the US Billboard 200 at number 32 and top soundtracks at number 2. As for the main track itself, while being acclaimed and popular by critics and audiences, it also achieved in getting its international ranking charts, including US and Canada Billboard Hot 100 at number 57 and 35. Billboard Dance Electronic Tracks at number 7 and the US Billboard Comedy Digital Tracks plus Hit Seeker Songs at number 2. When it comes to awards, there has been a lot. The film won several awards, including a BAFTA Award for Best Animated Film, and it was nominated for a Golden Globe and Annie Award for Best Animated Film, along several Annie nominations for Best Directing, Best Editing, Best Production Design, Best Animated Effects, and Best Writing, winning the latter Writing Award. While the Effects Award category was awarded to Big Hero 6, and the rest of the categories, including the Golden Globe, were given to How to Train Your Dragon 2. The film was also preselected for the list of nominees for Best Animated Film at the Oscars, but unfortunately it wasn't nominated, which for many people considered that fact as an unfair snub, which even Neil Patrick Harris referenced his reaction regarding the controversial issue at the Oscars and being the host. On the other hand, it did receive an Academy Award nomination for Best Song with Everything's Awesome, but it lost to Selma with the song Glory. Afterwards, the film would make a huge global impact with particularly its great merchandising, and its popularity even went big that became park attractions, game franchises, and other medias.
Even the LEGO YouTube channel released an animated special called the Emmett Awards, representing the child nominees and winners for making their own video editions, including music video compilations and their own LEGO designs based on different categories in monthly contests from February to September of the same year when the movie premiered.
In 2016, a 4D film attraction based on the movie was premiered and opened at Legoland Florida Park.
And later in 2019, another ride was put and named Masters of Builders, most likely inspired by the Disney attraction Soarin', with a glimpse of the further adventures of the characters, including its follow-up, which you'll know eventually what will happen, ironically when expanding the universe and franchise, since this was also opened on March after the 5th anniversary of the film on February.
In 2015, a LEGO-themed action-adventure crossover video game was made,
called LEGO Dimensions,
which consists a Toys-to-Life format where the player has exclusive LEGO figures and a toy pad that can be played within the game itself, where it features characters plus guest movie cameo characters from the movie and environments from over 30 different franchises. In other words, when it comes to spin-offs, Princess Unikitty would have her own show named Unikitty, premiering from 2017 with 3 seasons onward. On a side note, Emmett and Lucy would make a cameo appearance in The Simpsons episode Brick Like Me, which for the most part has 3D animation style reminiscent to the movie, but not exactly a parody since the Simpsons creators weren't aware of the movie's existence at the last minute. With that said, the Lego Movie has been regarded as one of the greatest animated films of all time, and its legacy has proved to everybody small or big that anything done with a touch of fun, creativity, and imagination by using tools and even Legos can make everything awesome.
I wonder what this does.
What the heck? Out with the old, in with the new.